I decided to open up our marriage, ended up getting pregnant, and now my family has turned their backs on me, while my husband is pushing for a divorce. I'm 38 years old. Let's go with the name Shannon for me, and my husband, we'll call him Mike, is 44. We tied the knot when I was just 19, only a month after our daughter, whom we'll call Emily, was born. Emily is now 19 herself. Almost a year later, we welcomed our son, whom we'll name Dylan. Both of them are now attending the same college, which is about 5 hours away from where we live. Even though we got married young, with not much money to our names and a baby in tow, Mike and I managed to make it work from the start. We had a really good life together. Mike has a solid job now and has always been an amazing provider, husband and dad, even during those early years. I worked part-time as well, just 3 days a week, on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Financially, we're in a good place. We own our home, have a nice amount saved up, and have plenty of money to live comfortably. Our family was rock solid, and Mike, the kids, and I were an inseparable team. Until I got involved with someone who turned out to be incredibly manipulative. It all started off so harmlessly. We have a dog that's practically a member of the family. Like I mentioned, I only work on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so I'm usually home on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On those days, I take our dog to the park. When I'm working, Mike comes home during his lunch break to walk the dog, and we both take her out on the weekends. About 3 months ago, during one of my park visits, I met a guy, let's call him Nate, who's 37 years old. Our dogs hit it off right away. Nate mentioned he had seen me at the park with my dog several times, though I couldn't remember ever seeing him before. It became a regular thing. We kept running into each other at the park every time I went. We started talking more and became casual friends. There was nothing inappropriate at first. We were just two dog lovers having friendly chats. One evening over dinner, I told Mike about this guy Nate I met at the dog park. I asked if he had ever noticed Nate there. Mike said he hadn't, and I told him that Nate's dog and ours had become buddies. We had a little laugh about it and then moved on to other topics. As time went on, things between Nate and me started to shift. About 2 months ago, during one of our chats at the park, Nate mentioned he lived in a nearby luxury apartment complex. This place was only a quarter mile from the park and about half a mile from our house. I commented on how nice the apartments looked from the outside and asked about the interiors since a friend of mine was thinking about renting there, which was true at the time. Nate suggested I bring my dog over to his apartment for a quick look and to snap some photos for my friend. I knew I should have politely declined, but instead, I agreed. The moment I stepped into his apartment, I realized I had crossed a line. Nate showed me around, and I stayed for about 10 minutes, thanked him, and told him I needed to head home. He asked if I'd be back at the park the following Tuesday. I said yes, and then left. That was the beginning of my infidelity, because I didn't mention my visit to Nate's apartment when I got home that night. Instead, I gave Mike extra attention, cooked a fantastic dinner, and we cuddled on the couch until it was time for bed. It was a really nice evening. The following Tuesday, I met up with Nate at the park again, and we ended up talking for nearly 2 hours. As our conversation was winding down, I told him that we needed to step back from our friendship because we were crossing a line. He acknowledged it, but insisted that it felt so right, and that there was undeniable chemistry between us. I could have pulled back and ended things right there, but unfortunately, I agreed with him. Things escalated quickly after that, and the next Tuesday, I spent the afternoon at Nate's apartment, and we became physically involved. Surprisingly, that evening, I didn't feel much guilt or remorse for what I had done. Instead, I felt an even stronger desire and passion for my husband, and we had a wonderful night together. Looking back now, I'm completely disgusted with myself, but I have to be honest. Nate and I continued to meet up at his place every Tuesday and Thursday until this past Friday, my D-Day, which was almost 2 months after our physical relationship began. I should have picked up on the fact that something was off with my husband 2 weeks ago when his behavior suddenly changed, but I was too wrapped up in the affair to notice. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. That's when things started shifting with Mike. He began giving me short, clipped answers and stopped really talking to me. He also rejected my advances for intimacy more than once and didn't initiate anything himself anymore. Around this time, he started working late, often not getting home until after 8 p.m. He said he and his coworkers were tied up with a big presentation and that they were all eating takeout at the office. While these kinds of projects did come up now and then, it was strange for something like this to drag on for 2 weeks straight. When I asked him about it, he just said it was a top-secret project that would be done by Friday. I took his word for it and felt relieved, thinking I'd soon have my loving husband back. He promised me that he'd make up for lost time and that we'd have an emotionally charged weekend together. But the emotions I faced on Friday were nothing like what I had expected. When I got home, I found a big manila envelope taped to the door with my name on it. When I opened it, I was completely floored. Inside were pages and pages of messages that Nate and I had exchanged on the fake Facebook accounts we created to communicate during our affair. As I read through them, I broke down in tears and could barely catch my breath. It was so overwhelming that I even thought about calling 911. I dropped the envelope on the floor and started pacing around the house, trying to figure out who had left it at my door. Was it Nate, my husband, or someone else entirely? My questions were answered when I walked into the bedroom. There, right in the middle of the bed, was a white gift box with a big red bow on top and a card with my name on the to line and Mike's name on the from line. Shaking and full of anxiety, I slowly removed the bow and opened the box, only to find divorce papers inside. At that moment, I realized my world had crumbled, and I collapsed onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably into a pillow. After spending about an hour mulling over my next steps and practicing what I would say to Mike, I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I kept trying, dialing over and over, but he never answered. So I switched to texting, sending him a message, but still got no response. With my anxiety building, I paced around the house, trying to figure out what to do next. I then attempted to reach out to Emily and Dylan, both by calls and texts, but they weren't answering either, which struck me as odd. Not long after, I received a text from Mike. In it, he let me know that he was fully aware of everything, and so were our kids, his extended family, and, as of 15 minutes ago, my own parents. He went on to say that he had moved out and signed a lease for an apartment, adding that I'd be hearing from his attorney soon. He ended the message with, "Enjoy your new life with Nate." As soon as I read that, I broke down in tears, crying for hours, only pausing when my mom called. But instead of offering comfort, she tore into me without giving me a chance to say a word, then hung up on me. I kept trying to call her back, but she wouldn't answer. Finally, I got through to my dad. When I asked to speak with Mom, he told me that she had nothing more to say to me. Then, my dad went on to express how deeply disappointed and ashamed he was of me, admitting that he never thought his own daughter could do something like this. His words crushed me, and I couldn't stop crying as I apologized over and over. He stayed silent as I poured my heart out. When I finally finished, he told me to pull myself together and try to do better. I replied with a simple, "Okay, Daddy, I will." And then we ended the call. At that point, I felt too humiliated to reach out to any friends or other family members, so I retreated to my bedroom and cried alone. I realized I needed to call Nate, both to end things between us and to have someone to talk to during this nightmare. When I called him, the first thing he asked was why I was using my phone instead of our fake Facebook accounts. I didn't beat around the bush and told him that Mike had found out about our affair and was filing for divorce. Nate's response was a flat, "Oh no, he knows? How?" I told him I didn't know how Mike found out. Nate kept pressing, asking if Mike had come across my Facebook account. I guess that must have been it. He then asked if Mike knew who he was, and I confirmed it, explaining that Mike had mentioned Nate by name in the text he sent me. Nate's reaction was a string of curse words, and he started shouting the F word so loudly that it set his dog off barking. After his outburst, he calmed down and said, "Okay, I'm sorry this happened, but you were careless. Let's cut all ties, delete our accounts and phone numbers, and hopefully, you can fix things with your marriage. Please don't contact me again." I was both shocked and disgusted by his complete lack of backbone, and I just replied with an okay. That was it. No apologies for destroying my marriage, no offers to help fix things, no gratitude, just selfish, self-preservation talk from a shallow man. How could I have been so foolish to cheat on Mike with anyone, let alone someone as revolting as Nate? I'm sitting here writing this at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, which probably gives you a pretty clear picture of where my mind is at right now. I've taken the entire week off work to focus on trying to get Mike and the kids to talk to me so I can apologize and start working on healing and moving forward. Does anyone have any advice on what I should do next? My spirit is crushed, and I feel so completely alone. I've lost everything except my dog as a result of my actions. Has anyone else who has strayed been cut off this quickly by their spouse? I mean, Mike is just gone and wants nothing to do with me. I know I hurt him deeply, but to completely erase me from his life and start divorce proceedings over this one foolish mistake feels incredibly harsh. Please, I need some help. Update. I'm back here because I need an outlet to deal with the overwhelming pain I'm feeling right now. I just got off the phone with my kids, who were finally on their way back to town after ignoring my calls and texts for 3 days. I had been hoping they were calling to talk things through and let me apologize. But instead, what I got was a barrage of insults, disrespect, and cruel names. I've never heard either of them speak like that before. Emily, in particular, was exceptionally harsh, and it seemed to influence how Dylan was acting. I did apologize, telling them that I had been manipulated by Nate, and that I felt somewhat victimized by him. I reminded them of all the years I'd been a great mom and a good wife to their dad up until now. But my daughter cut me off, saying that while I might have been great once, I've now become terrible. The worst. She ended the call by telling me that she and her brother would be spending the weekend with their dad and that I shouldn't expect to see them at all. This news broke my heart, especially since Sunday is Mother's Day, and my kids and husband used to make that day really special for me. This year, it looks like it'll just be me and my dog, who at least still loves me unconditionally. I get that a lot of what Emily and Dylan are feeling is the initial anger and betrayal they're experiencing, but it doesn't make it any easier to bear. I'm not looking for pity, just some words of encouragement. I'm truly grateful to those of you who have sent supportive messages. They've been a lifeline for me. I'll keep you updated as things develop. Update 2. I wanted to give you all an update since many of you have asked how I'm doing. I've been going to individual counseling for 2 weeks now, and it's been really helpful. My counselor is a wonderful woman who has given me the strength to keep moving forward. She explained that at this point, I've done everything I can to try and mend the relationships with my family. The best thing I can do now is to step back and wait. If they come back to me, it means there was always love there, and there always will be. If they don't, it suggests that the love wasn't real to begin with. She also suggested that I try transcendental meditation, which I started last week. It's brought me a greater sense of peace and inner calm, and I feel more in control of my thoughts than I ever have before. So that's where things stand in my life right now. I'll provide more updates as needed. In my next update, I hope to share that my husband and kids have welcomed me back, and we're once again a happy family. Update 3. It's been a while, but I'm back with an update. Buckle up, because I've got a lot to share. Some good news and some bad. A couple of weeks after my last update, I found out I was pregnant. Yes, at the age of 38. After trying for more than 15 years to have a third child, I discovered I was pregnant. The news was both shocking and overwhelming. I was overjoyed at the thought that this baby might be Mike's. But at the same time, I was terrified that it could be Nate's. I went into full-blown panic mode. My first instinct was to tell Mike, but I realized that if the baby wasn't his, I'd lose him forever. And if the baby turned out to be Nate's, I didn't want to keep it. But if I ended the pregnancy and Mike ever found out, he'd never forgive me because he's strongly against that. So here's what I did. I reached out to a DNA clinic to see if they could do a prenatal DNA test without needing the father's saliva. They told me it was possible, but only with specific other body samples, which I didn't have. The only potential sample I could think of was hair follicles. I found a few on Mike's brush, but there weren't nearly enough for a complete sample, so I hit a dead end there. My backup plan was to contact Nate and ask him to participate in and cover the cost of a prenatal DNA test. But when I tried to reach him, I found out he had blocked me and deleted his Facebook account. So, I decided to show up at his workplace and catch him when he arrived. When he saw me, he initially tried to ignore me, then asked, with a tone full of disgust, what I was doing there. I told him we needed to talk because I had something important to discuss. He made it clear that he wasn't interested in talking to me anymore, and even apologized for his role in the downfall of my marriage. In my head, I thought, yeah, right. Why didn't you think of that before pursuing me so relentlessly? Without holding back, I blurted out that I was pregnant, and he was the father. His response was, "Oh no, you're not going to trap me with a baby. I know this game." I told him to listen carefully. I said that if he didn't want me to walk into his office and report his inappropriate behavior to HR, he needed to do exactly what I was asking. I handed him the clinic's contact information and told him to schedule and pay for a paternity test. I made it clear that if he didn't take care of it within 48 hours, I would report everything to HR. That evening, Nate unblocked my phone and sent me a text saying he had scheduled an appointment for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m., knowing I had that day off. We both showed up at the clinic, but we didn't exchange a word. They called Nate in first to collect his saliva sample, and then it was my turn, and they drew my blood. It took a week to get the results, but the wait was worth it because Nate wasn't the father. Overwhelmed with relief and joy, I fell to my knees and thanked the Lord for blessing Mike and me with the precious child we had longed for. I was eager to share the news with Mike, but I still had no way to contact him since he had blocked me, and I didn't know where he was. At that point, my kids were still avoiding me and barely communicating. I texted Emily and Dylan, telling them I had something very important to discuss, and asked if they could arrange a three-way call. My daughter kept asking what it was about, but I just told her I would explain during the call. We set up the call, and I delivered the good news. But instead of sharing in the joy of welcoming a new sibling, both of them responded with bitterness and harsh words toward me. They immediately jumped to the conclusion that the baby must be Nate's. I reassured them, telling them I was certain it was their father's child. My son then asked how I could be so sure, and I explained that I had calculated it based on the estimated conception date. At that time, I didn't have the exact date, and didn't want to mention the DNA test with Nate, so I chose to explain it this way. My daughter then accused me of intentionally trapping her father by getting pregnant. I asked her how that could even be possible since all of this happened before her dad even knew about my involvement with Nate. But she doubled down, insisting that I had deliberately gotten pregnant by her father, just in case he found out about the affair. She was convinced that the baby was my way of trapping him. I firmly denied her accusation, telling her how absurd it was, and reminded her that her father and I had been trying to have another child for years. After a lot of back and forth, they finally agreed to talk to their dad and ask him to call me. I anxiously waited for Mike's call that night, but it never came. The next morning passed without any word from him either. Then, a little after 1 p.m. the following day, I got a call from Mike's attorney. She left me a voicemail, and I called her back right away. She told me she was representing Mike, and that he had informed her about my pregnancy and my claim that the baby was his. Hearing this, I couldn't hold back the flood of emotions and started crying uncontrollably. I begged her to let me speak directly with Mike. The attorney was sympathetic and kind but stood her ground. After I pulled myself together, she told me that Mike was requesting a paternity test to confirm the baby was his. I agreed immediately and offered to set it up as soon as possible, even saying I'd cover the cost out of my savings. The attorney asked me to schedule the appointment and mentioned that Mike would provide his saliva sample at a time when I wouldn't be present. I agreed, but I spent the entire night in tears, struggling with the fact that Mike believed I might lie to him about something as important as this. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't come with me to the appointment. The paternity test was conducted, and earlier this morning, the results came in, confirming conclusively that Mike is the father. While I already knew this, seeing the official results brought immense relief. I'm currently focused on putting the nightmare that Nate dragged me into behind me, and I'm eager to rebuild the relationship and trust with my family. I'm incredibly grateful for all the support and encouragement you've given me during this difficult time. Final update. Since many of you asked for an update, I wanted to share how things have been going for my family and me. Although we're still a work in progress, every day brings us a little closer to rebuilding the family we once had before Nate selfishly caused so much harm, and my mistakes played their part. First and foremost, Mike and I went through with the divorce. Despite all my pleading and begging, and even after the paternity test confirmed that he was the father, he still decided to proceed with the divorce. I had held on to hope that after the DNA results, we would talk, and he would hold me in his arms, telling me that everything would be okay. But that moment never came. Instead, we had a meeting at his attorney's office, which was recorded. During that meeting, Mike told me he was going ahead with the divorce, and that he hoped we could transition into a good co-parenting relationship. I couldn't stop my tears and had to ask for a moment to compose myself. When I returned, we discussed custody arrangements, with him wanting to split custody time with me. I told him I thought it would be best if he had full custody, which brought on another wave of tears. Ultimately, our divorce was finalized, and we split our assets and the custody of our child evenly. I received a year of alimony and ongoing child support. Mike also agreed to cover 50% of the taxes, insurance, and utilities for our family home for 2 years to ensure a safe and stable environment for the baby. In late January, our precious little one was born, and he truly is a miraculous child. Not only did he come into our lives after 15 long years of trying, but he's also played a pivotal role in bringing our family back together. My relationship with my daughter, Emily, and my son, Dylan, has returned to normal, and they absolutely adore their little brother. Emily was even by my side in the delivery room when he was born. Since his birth, both kids have been coming home from college every weekend, each taking turns holding the baby. Mike, my ex-husband, has also been a constant presence in my home since the baby arrived. He comes over straight from work and stays with us until I put the baby down for the night. Just yesterday, he brought takeout dinner for the two of us, and although we didn't eat together, I see this as a positive step forward. Mike and I are on very friendly terms, and we haven't brought up the affair or the divorce. I haven't pressured him or brought up the possibility of us reconciling. I'm still attending individual counseling, and my therapist advised me to give him space and avoid talking about our relationship, which I've been doing, and it seems to be working. With each passing day, I feel like I'm slowly rebuilding the love and connection with Mike. I've applied the same approach with Emily and Dylan. If I manage to win Mike back as a husband, or even as a life partner, I'm determined never to jeopardize our relationship again. He, along with my kids, means the world to me, and I'll do everything in my power to show them how much I value and cherish them. I don't have any more updates at the moment. While I wish things could go back to the way they used to be, I know that's not possible. So I'm focusing on appreciating what I have now, which, in my opinion, is pretty wonderful. This might be my final post unless Mike and I decide to officially reconcile. If that happens, I'll be sure to come back and share the good news with everyone. Once again, thank you to everyone who supported me throughout this journey. Alright, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. Hello. I just need to share what's been on my mind lately and could really use an outside perspective. I'll try to sum it up for you. Back in February, my husband, 33 male, and I, 31 female, had been married for a year when he had to go on a critical business trip to the UK for 3 weeks. Unfortunately, things got extended, and he and his team had to stay an extra 2 weeks to finalize the deal. This was the first time we'd been apart since we got together 6 years ago, so I was dealing with a whirlwind of emotions. I tend to get overly clingy and emotional when things don't go as planned, and that's something I've always struggled with. I'll admit that I can be difficult to live with at times. On top of that, I have some mental health issues that contribute to my insecurities and paranoia, especially when it comes to the fear that my husband might be cheating. The fact that he extended his trip by 2 weeks only made my concerns worse. I even called his office to confirm that his entire team was still in the UK. During this time apart, I struck up a friendship with our neighbor, and one night, after watching a movie together, things took an unexpected turn. I realized that I allowed things to get out of hand, but I was overwhelmed with worry about my husband's situation. That night, our neighbor became physically affectionate, but my anxiety caused me to stop things from going further. However, the next day, I found myself revisiting the situation because I didn't want to regret not knowing where things might lead. Things did escalate into a full-blown affair over the next few encounters, whether at my place or his. I continued to feel anxious about my husband's situation, but I didn't experience an overwhelming sense of guilt. This has made me question if there's something wrong with me. Things took a messy turn when my husband came home in early March without any prior warning. He thought he'd surprise me, as if that was a good idea. The house was a complete disaster. Empty beer cans and snack wrappers were scattered all over the bed, making it look like a tornado had hit, and dirty laundry was everywhere. It was quite a sight. I guess it's somewhat understandable since I wasn't expecting him back. Otherwise, I would have cleaned up. Especially the bed, which was a dead giveaway. When he asked about it, I told him I had some friends over because I was feeling lonely. We played games, had some drinks, and it was nothing out of the ordinary. I'm not sure if he believed my story, but after seeing the mess, he decided to start cleaning up. I tried to stop him because I knew there might be incriminating evidence lying around, and sure enough, there was. He found a bag in the trash with a used condom, its wrapper, and a toothbrush. My heart sank, and my hands started shaking. It felt surreal. Somehow I managed to keep it together and told him that 2 couples were among the friends I had invited over, implying that they had gotten intimate. My husband looked at me for what felt like an eternity, and in that moment, I could see that he didn't believe me. So, I confessed. I told him about the affair, about my involvement with our neighbor. His expression changed to one of disappointment, hurt, anger, and fear all at once. I don't know what came over me, but the next thing I knew, I was on my knees, begging for forgiveness and another chance. But deep down, I'm not even sure I deserve one. I know I made a huge mistake. I tried to explain that it was a one-time thing, fueled by my vulnerability while he was gone, but he didn't buy it. He suggested that the affair might have been going on the entire time he was away. My husband laid out 3 conditions for us to move forward. It had to be a one-time thing. It wasn't premeditated, just a foolish, impulsive mistake, maybe under the influence of alcohol, and there were absolutely no romantic feelings involved. He made it clear that if any of these conditions weren't met, he'd leave. He also asked to see my phone conversations with the other guy from the past few months to make sure there were no plans or signs of romance. But I had deleted those conversations with no backups, so all he has left is to trust me. Honestly, if he had seen those messages, it might have been the end of our marriage anyway. Part of me thinks he might be better off without me. I'm considering initiating a divorce. I've heard he's already consulted a lawyer, and I'd rather be the one to file than have him serve me. So what do you think? I know I messed up, but I believe there has to be a way to work through this. Couples go through tougher situations every day and still manage to keep their relationships intact. I'm open to your advice and really want to hear your thoughts. Update. Hi everyone. I wanted to give you an update on the situation I talked about earlier. I'm really grateful for all the advice and support you've given me during this difficult time. Having this community to turn to has been a tremendous help. After doing some serious thinking and having more conversations, my husband and I decided to sit down and talk once more. I realized it was time to be completely honest about everything, which meant telling him the full truth about the affair that happened during his business trip. It was a tough conversation, but I knew it was necessary for both of us to really understand what had happened. I confessed my mistakes, acknowledged my wrongdoings, and admitted that I hadn't considered his feelings. It was an intense and emotional moment, but I felt that full transparency was crucial. In response, my husband went through a whirlwind of emotions. He felt hurt, angry, and confused as he tried to process everything I was telling him. He asked for some time to think things over, and I agreed, giving him the space he needed. After some time, he came to a decision and shared his thoughts with me. He told me that he was not only hurt by the affair itself, but also by the lies and deception that followed. Trust had been shattered, and he understood that rebuilding it would be a long and difficult process. He asked me to leave the house, saying that he needed time to figure out what our future would look like. But I refused because, despite everything, I'm still his wife and have legal rights to the house. I couldn't just leave without a plan in place. Right now, tensions are high, and emotions are still raw between us. He's tried different ways to convince me to leave, including getting very angry, having violent outbursts, resorting to guilt trips, and being manipulative. But I've reached a point where I have nothing left to lose, so I told him straight up that I'm not moving out. I know he needs time to process everything and decide what to do about our future, but he'll have to do that with me still in the house. Don't get me wrong. I deeply regret the pain I've caused, and I'm fully committed to taking responsibility for my mistakes. I don't believe this has to be the end of our story. I still have a lot to offer, not to the neighbor, just to be clear. I understand that there's a long road ahead, but I'm willing to put in the work to rebuild trust if that's what it takes to save our marriage. I truly believe that every couple faces their own unique challenges, and it's possible to get through tough situations if both people are willing to make the effort. I'm still holding out hope that we can mend our relationship, but I'm also preparing for the possibility that my husband might decide that ending things is the best choice for us. Once again, I want to thank all of you for your support, advice, and understanding. Having a place to share and receive guidance during such a difficult time means a lot. I'll keep you updated as things progress. Please keep us in your thoughts and send positive energy our way. Update. Hi everyone, I'm back with another update. Recently, my husband served me with divorce papers, and it was a devastating blow. I had been clinging to a slim hope, but it seems he's made up his mind to go ahead with the divorce. Even though we're still living under the same roof, there's a lot of tension, and he's been avoiding me like I have some kind of contagious disease. Our families have been informed, and as expected, they haven't been supportive of my actions and decisions. Both my parents and in-laws have harshly criticized me, and right now, we're not on speaking terms. I'm going through this difficult situation on my own, and it's been incredibly hard. The thought of divorce is terrifying, not just because of the potential social stigma, but also because of the impact it would have on my life. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm also scared of being alone and having to support myself again. This fear might have played a role in my strong reaction when my husband asked me to leave the house. I do care about him, and I'm starting to realize that I have to take responsibility for my actions. The idea of us not being together anymore is painful, but it might be a consequence I have to face. I've always wanted to start a family, and for the past few days, I've been feeling unwell. So there's a small glimmer of hope on that front. I realize that, given the circumstances, it might not be a possibility now. But I also believe that if I were pregnant, my husband wouldn't abandon his child. So maybe having a baby could be a solution. I know that eventually people in our small town might find out about our situation, and that's something I'll have to deal with. I'm heading out soon to get a pregnancy test done at the lab. I've tried home kits, but they've all come back negative. I'm feeling anxious and sick just thinking about what might happen if I'm not actually pregnant. Could this really be the end for us? Edit. I'm not pregnant.